Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) says Nigeria can drive positive changes through environment, social and governance projects. Oil prices steady Friday with Brent above $83, and energy experts say end of Nigerian fuel subsidy set to squeeze Europe's refiners. The Securities and Exchange Commission. Well, this is Business Express coming to you. You're watching Business Express. Let's begin by telling you that the Securities and Exchange Commission has stated that Nigeria has the opportunity to drive positive changes through the focused promotion of environmental, social and governance, and as well as sustainable finance and financial market, while protecting the environment, reducing inequality, promoting security, and fostering national economic prosperity. This was stated by the Director General of the SEC, Lamido Yuguda, at the workshop on sustainable finance organized by Securities and Exchange Commission in collaboration with the Financial Center for Sustainability. The DG expressed the determination of the Commission to stand firm in its commitment to champion the promotion of sustainable financing through formulating the necessary rules and regulations, working together with stakeholders to promote advocacy and encourage dialogue, with a view to creating the required enabling environment for assessing the progress achieved and overcoming the challenges that remain. Russian President Vladimir Putin says his government is making full efforts to avert global food crisis. Vladimir Putin told leaders and officials from African countries Thursday that Russia is making every effort to avert a global food crisis, despite concerns that its withdrawal from a deal allowing grain shipments from Ukraine will cause price spikes. He added that Russia intends to ship up to 50,000 tons of grain and to Burkina Faso, Zimbabwe, Mali, Somalia, Eritrea, and Central African Republic in the next 3 to 4 months.
Assist our African friends in developing not only the college but also general and vocational education. We are ready to train teachers, curators, and technical specialists for school and vocational schools, to establish joint schools for which we already develop adjusted methodological papers, namely when it comes to developing our infrastructure, industrialization process, the energy issues of our continent. These are the main aspects, the main areas where we can have an active.
Now, the Russia-African Summit is our focus on Business Express today. Our guest is an economist, a political economist, Elias. You're welcome to Business Express. Okay, the Russian president has said Russia is making every effort to avert a global food crisis. What do you make of this commitment?
Right. Basically, globally, there is need for food security, and if you look at the Black Sea grain deal, you discover that it contributes about 23% to more influx of food globally. And you also recall that Russia, with the challenge they are having, they also need to expand their businesses and outreach to countries. And Africa remains one of the best countries that they can shift to at this point in time. You recall that their first Russia-African summit last year had about 43 African countries in attendance, but you discover that this year it's about 17 countries that was invited, and the sole aim is to make sure that they also really take advantage of Africa. And going forward, you see that they also agree that they are going to give Africa 25 to 50,000 grain with free delivery. That simply shows that they want to really maximize. And if you also recall that last year they did about 11.5 million tons of grain to Africa, and that's a huge number, and which the total business they actually did with Africa was about 18 billion dollars, which means a lot to them. So they don't want to take chances for that. They want to maximize and look at that, because if you look at Africa today, as at January to February, we have done a lot of business. That's about 60% increment, which is an offshoot of what happened at Russia, Africa 2022. So they want to take advantage of African market and maximize the grain. And if you also look at, according to him, he said he's doing well for Africa simply because after the grain deal was brokered, then the only 30% came to Africa. Others are going to other countries. So he wants to focus on Africa to do better. But I think it's for his own
But the question
economy.
is, why focus on Africa? Why is it always Africa? On
Right.
the receiving end.
Right. You agree with me that the population of Africa is about 1.5 billion. That's a huge number. And you also know that we are in dear need of
And don't forget
food
that we also have the land and resources to actually cultivate wheat as well,
but
as other grains as well.
I will agree with you that we have the land, but are we cultivating it? That's the question. So we do not have food security. So we rely on this importation of food. And that's why he also sees it as an opportunity to take advantage of Africa. So we wouldn't blame him. Once we have arable of land and we cannot cultivate as expected, we rely on importation. You could see he's also giving us aid, saying that he's going to give 6 African countries. That simply shows how inefficient we are to really cultivate our lands and have food sufficiency. Without him, you agree with me that we are going to have a serious, without Russia-African trade, you agree with me that we are going to have a serious challenge, because how do we mitigate against 11.5 million tons of grain that we needed? That's the challenge we have. And coming to Nigeria as well, you agree with me that Nigeria import petroleum products from them, fertilizer, wheat and what have you. So this they believe that without them we cannot, and it is true, unless we change our narrative by making sure that we are food sufficient, as governments rightly want to do.
Before we continue on the issue of food security, besides grains, what other thing do you think that Africans should look to take advantage from the summit?
Right. There's a lot of products, agricultural produce beyond the grains. Fertilizer is very, very important to us. You agree with me that even though we cultivate this farmland, we also need fertilizer. So fertilizer is part of it. Petroleum product is part of it. He also talked about technology. These are what we need from this. But I think Nigeria should always, or Africa generally, should look at what they can take advantage of, like technology that we can domesticate over time. At least you agree with me that our Ajakuta iron steel is still there, so I think we should take advantage and tell them that help us to revive this industry, because if Ajakuta iron and steel is working...
Already there was an engagement with the Vice President on the issue of steel.
Right, yes, we need to deepen it the more, because if we deepen it the more, it will help us to really broker what we expected, because if that industry is working, I assure you, it will contribute in no small level to Nigeria GDP and Nigeria economy. It also creates employment that we are yearning for in Nigeria especially.
But the thing here is, should we just be caught up in the middle when the West and Russia are having their issues? It's more or less like there's political considerations to this whole thing. Don't you think so?
Right. You agree with me that globally there's also that global politics. And that global politics, we also want to make sure that they take advantage of the weaker part of the world, which is Africa at this time. So at every point in time with a global problem, you see that we always have food crisis or the ripple effect of any challenges globally. It's because we don't have adequate shock absorber and we don't provide for ourselves enough what we can always fall back onto. If you look at our foreign reserve and everything in Africa, we are the whims and caprices of this global economy. So for us to really do well, we need to start thinking how we can be food sufficient in Africa, how we can refine our petroleum products in Africa, how we can develop an homegrown technology that will solve a lot of problems. If not, we remain and go cap in hand every now and then to these global economies that always take advantage of Africa.
Okay, let me pick your thought on this. What do you make of the attendance there? The first day, it appears that most African leaders tend to somehow send their representatives there. When you expect the whole leaders to come and take advantage of what Russia has to offer.
Well,
what
I
do you
think
make of it?
It is expected. You know, African leaders are meticulous. They don't want to find themselves in the middle of these two giants fighting. So they are so meticulous that they know that if you don't have the head of state there, the president, you can have the vice president, which is better. But you also look at it on a different ground. Remember, we have what we call BRICS. BRICS, which comprises of Brazil, India, China, and South Africa. So South Africa seems to be the leader pushing for all this because they have a kind of organization that they come together. And this is also a precursor for the planned BRICS meeting that is coming up. So that is just the focus. So every African country are so conscious, and that's why you see that last year we have 43 African countries in attendance, but this year it's only 17 African countries that is attending. That shows that every country is trying to take a stand on the issue and make sure that they don't commit more to this, because we need aid from both of them. Because if you go to America, we need aid from and support from America. We also need from Russia. So we have to be meticulous, and I want to applaud them for that, because you can't just pack everything and stay in one place. You have to just balance so that at least you can still trade with each of them on different products. Because when you say you want to trade with them, you can be doing food with Russia, or grains rather, or agricultural produce. You can also go to technology to other country in the world. So I think it's a good one to be meticulous while dealing with global players.
Okay, don't you think it's high time Africans begin to look at themselves and start this conversation about addressing the issue of shortfall of grains and other products that they have to depend on other parts of the country for it, like the African Continental Free Trade is a good policy, but why are we falling behind in taking advantage of the opportunities there?
Right. The challenge is that there's what we call comparative advantage. You cannot have everything you want.
But we have the population, don't forget.
Right.
And we also have the land mass.
But you cannot have the produce. Our land cannot give us a sufficient with produce. So what we just need to do is that to make sure we work on our comparative advantage. There's some things we don't have that they have, but we make sure that we maximize, like cocoa among others that we have, and make sure that we also produce it like oil and gas that we produce locally and also export. That will bring a balance of trade and also balance of payment, until we stop being a rentier country in Africa, whereby we take our raw things abroad, refine it, and we'll be subjected to global prices, until we change our narrative and produce locally, consume locally, and make sure we work on a balance of payment and balance of trade. And one thing Africa is not looking at, we also look at maybe we also look at other things, but we don't look at trade policy. It becomes a very significant thing that we need to look at. If you can have a good trade policy and you balance it, you will help other things. Because if you are exporting and you are exporting a finished product, you have a comparative advantage and you take it fully, because all the value chain must be taken. Look at them now. They take all advantage of all the value chain and give us the finished product. But in our case, we always take out our raw material and will be subjected to buy from them at an international determined price, which is not good for Africa.
Thank you very much, Elias. It's a pleasure having you on the program.
Thank you for having me.
I'm moving on ahead of International Investment, Trade and Commodity Summit to be hosted by Nigeria. Trade experts have expressed confidence in Nigeria's potential in the quest to increase exports of made-in-Nigeria product and services through international partnerships. This is as an interministerial committee meets to ensure success of the summit.
We want to take advantage of all market access opportunities for our goods and services, and we are more specific and direct in that regard. We recall the continuous reference to patronage of made in Nigerian goods and services, and we also continue to refer to the opportunity that exists in the context of Africa and the context of African Continental Free Trade Area and the potentials that exist for us.
If anyone wants to invest their capital, they want to make sure that the capital they invest, they can regroup it. Secondly, Nigerians eat and consume what we do not produce. We have to now learn to produce what we need first before we...
Talking energy, reports say one of Europe's main markets for gasoline has shrunk, threatening to squeeze European refiners after Nigeria removed fuel subsidies, which destroy much of the country's domestic demand and the regional market for smuggled fuel. Meanwhile, oil prices were steady on Friday, but on track for a fifth straight week of gains, with investors optimistic healthy demand and supply cuts will keep prices buoyant. In early trade, Brent crude slipped 28 cents to $83.96 a barrel, while U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude dipped 18 cents to $79.91 a barrel. Bullish demand expectations were boosted on Thursday after U.S. second quarter gross domestic product grew at a forecast beating 2.4%. Nigeria's cocoa price rose in Edo and Akwa Ibom states. Let's see how other commodities are trading on the global markets. The federal government has launched a new report which shows that small firms in Nigeria do not like to borrow money from banks and are not stable due to the various challenges they face. Statistician General of the Federation, Adeyemi Adeniran, at the launch of the report in Abuja, says the new report is expected to support government's poverty eradication effort at the grassroots. Moplandakok reports.
Small firms in Nigeria are the highest employers of labor, but experts say the various challenges they face cannot be surmounted without the necessary data. The National Bureau of Statistics, in collaboration with other public and private partners in the last 1 year, embarked on a sample of such small business firms in low-income neighborhoods weekly.
Taking detailed records of their spending, of their expenses, of their revenues, everything about the economic life of these firms over the course of a year.
The outcome of the report was what was presented to the public.
And they are averse to take risk. Most of the goods that they produce are not of high standard that meet the export requirement. If government can address this constraint, it will make them to stabilize.
The report aims to improve the understanding of how small businesses can overcome the barriers they face in order to prosper in the modern economy.
The data gathered will assist in drawing conclusions about some key information needed for need-based interventions within the MSME space.
The research, which was carried out in Lagos, Kaduna, and Enugu, has already been carried out in 6 other countries, including Colombia, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Uganda. In Abuja, Muplang Dakok.
Now let's bring you up to speed with a development in the equities market. The Nigerian stock market ended the last trading day of the week in negative territory as the NGX All Share Index closed trading at 65,056.39 basis points. 459.7 million shares exchange hands in 8,051 deals valued at 5.34 billion naira, while market capitalization at the close of trading stood at 35.4 trillion naira. For a summary of stock market activities on the global scene, let's join Bosidi Abel.
Global markets are sensitive to monetary policy moves in Japan due to its long-standing status as the world's biggest creditor nation. Japan's Nikkei 225 in Asia fell as much as 2.4% on Friday after the Bank of Japan dusted its stance on its yield curve control policy. The benchmark index ended the day 0.40% down at 32,759.23. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index climbed 1.41% in its final hour of trade. The Shanghai Composite was up 1.84% to close at the highest level since May 22. European stocks were lower Friday as investors processed a week of earnings and central bank decisions. Stock futures in the U.S. ticked up Friday as Wall Street awaited new inflation data due Friday. Futures tied to the Dow Jones Industrial Average were 77 points or 0.22% higher. S&P 500 futures were up by 0.42%. The Nasdaq 100 futures also advanced 0.74%. In Africa, Tunisia rose 0.08% at 9,035.08, while Namibia and South Africa's JSE Africa Top 40 closed negative. Bosedi Able, Business.
Let's look at the exchange rate before we go. This is where we end this edition of Business Express. We value your feedback, so keep the comments, observations, and suggestions coming. Be informed that all previous episodes are available on YouTube on the NTS channel. Business Express returns next week. I was Al Bakar. Thanks for your company.